There's a difference between knowing something and understanding it, and you've felt it more times than you can count, because your head collects and your heart comprehends, and most people spend their entire lives mistaking collection for transformation, stacking concepts like bricks and calling it a house, repeating words like prayers while their nervous system still flinches at the same triggers, still reaches for the same comfort, still collapses into the same reactions, and then they wonder why nothing changes. Some people move differently, not louder, not holier, not more spiritual in the performative way, but quieter, heavier, more settled, like something inside them has stopped begging the world for permission, and when they hear truth, it doesn't bounce off the intellect like a coin on concrete. It lands, it sinks, it changes the temperature of their chest, it rearranges the way they walk through a room. It shifts the way they respond to pressure, and you can see it in their eyes because they're no longer trying to win arguments with reality. Spiritual intelligence isn't a badge, and it isn't a vocabulary, it's capacity. It's how much paradox you can hold without panicking and sprinting toward a side. It's how long you can stay with "I don't know" without reaching for a doctrine to sedate yourself. It's how clean your inner instrument is when life asks you to decide, and whether the decision comes from clarity or from fear wearing a costume. The mind is useful, but it's a tool, and most men let the tool become the master. The mind categorizes, plans, predicts, defends, and it's brilliant at that, but it can't touch truth directly. It can only circle it, it can only point at it, it can only create a map of water, and there is a kind of man who will study the map for 10 years and never drink. Because drinking means surrendering control. Drinking means letting truth enter the body, and the body changes when truth enters it. The heart is not sentimentality. The heart is not being nice. The heart is the gate where reality becomes personal, where knowledge becomes knowing, where the signal becomes strong enough that you stop needing constant reassurance from other people's opinions. And contemplative traditions describe this in different languages because different cultures looked at the same inner mechanism and named it with their own symbols. And if you understand symbols properly, you don't fight over them, you let them point. Some called it Hridaya, some called it IB, some located it as a junction where subject and object stop arguing and dissolve into a single field of experience. And whether you take that literally or as a precise inner metaphor, the point is the same. There is a center in you that knows before thought finishes speaking. And you already know this is real because you've had moments where your mind was still making a list, still generating pros and cons, still demanding proof, and your chest already knew, already said yes or no, already warned you, already pulled you towards something clean or away from something heavy. And the tragedy is that most people override that signal, then call the consequences bad luck. This is the unnamed way. The way of the man who returns to the center before he returns to the noise, who can hold stillness without needing to announce it, who doesn't need to constantly update the world on his internal weather because he's not seeking witnesses, he's seeking alignment. That's why some people can read a powerful teaching 100 times and nothing changes, and then on a random day, with the same words, the same page, the same sentence, something drops into the chest and the man goes quiet because the intellect finally stopped trying to own the truth and the heart finally received it. It's not new information, it's new reception. It's the difference between repeating discipline matters and becoming the kind of person who doesn't negotiate with himself anymore. And here's where the separation happens, not with insults, not with arrogance, but with a clean psychological line. Most people react. They don't mean to, but they do. They're trained to. The phone buzzes, they move. The market spikes, they click. A person provokes them, they speak. A fear rises, they obey. Their life becomes a chain of impulses dressed up as choices, and they call it being human because they've never met the other type, the type who waits, who lets the first wave pass, who watches the body's craving for certainty like an animal pacing behind a fence, who can feel the pressure to act and still choose not to act because they know that pressure is not guidance, it's just pressure. Not everyone can tolerate waiting. Not everyone can tolerate the silence between stimulus and response, because in that silence the masks fall and you meet yourself, And most people would rather stay busy than meet the part of them that's still afraid. But some men have always known there's a different way to operate. They felt it since they were young, the strange dissatisfaction with the crowd's rhythm, the sense that rushing is a kind of weakness, that constant explanation is a kind of begging, that the loudest person in the room is often the most internally unstable. And if that's you, you don't need to be told. You recognize it the way you recognize your own name. If this is landing, hit like, not for the algorithm, but as a private signal to yourself that you're paying attention. Because small confirmations create continuity, and continuity creates transformation. And now the mirror, because if you want to see how your inner system truly works, you don't need a mountain cave, you need a chart. Trading doesn't care what you believe. The market is a clean mirror, ruthless and honest, and it exposes the gap between what you think you are and what you actually are. Because you can talk about patience for years and then watch price approach a level and feel your finger itch like an addict, and suddenly you discover the truth. The body's not trained, the heart is not leading, the mind is running a survival program, and the survival program always wants the same thing: right now relief. This is why strategy hopping happens. This is why men chase indicators like talismans. This is why they call it research when it's actually fear. Because the mind, when it doesn't trust the heart, tries to manufacture certainty, and the market punishes manufactured certainty like it punishes arrogance, not out of malice, but because reality doesn't negotiate with your need. You've seen this cycle. You find a model, you feel hope, you take a few trades, you win, you feel invincible, you lose, you feel betrayed, you change something, you lose again, you change more, you shrink, you hesitate, then you overcompensate, then you revenge trade, then you swear you'll be disciplined, then one clean setup appears and you enter too early because you didn't want to miss it. And the pain isn't the loss. The pain is realizing you still can't trust yourself. That's not a strategy problem. That's a center of gravity problem. When the mind leads, you trade to feel better. When the heart leads, you trade to execute. And execution has a different texture, a different temperature, because it doesn't beg the market for validation. It waits for alignment, it moves once, cleanly, and then it accepts outcome without collapse. Because the heart can hold opposites without breaking, profit and loss, confidence and humility, patience and aggression, all in the same chest without needing to become dramatic. This is where the hunter-trader archetype appears, not as a persona, but as a nervous system. The hunter doesn't hope in the market. He observes. He reads conditions. He knows the difference between movement and meaning, between volatility and signal, between noise and intention. He doesn't need constant trades to feel alive, because he's not trying to use the market as therapy. He can sit through an entire session and do nothing, and his self-respect doesn't drop, because his identity isn't attached to activity, it's attached to standards. He knows his levels, he knows his CLS ranges, he knows what manipulation looks like when it's real and what it looks like when it's just his imagination craving a story. And he doesn't force the chart to confess what he wants to hear. He can feel the moment the market is inviting him, and he can also feel the moment it's baiting him. And the difference is subtle, and it's not purely intellectual. It's felt because discernment lives in the chest. This is why you can give two traders the same model, the same rules, the same chart, and one will turn it into consistency, and the other will turn it into chaos. Because the model is not the master, the man is. Identity is the real edge, not the identity you announce. The identity you embody when nobody is watching. The identity you embody when you're down two trades and the third setup appears. The identity you embody when you're up for the week and your ego wants to press. The identity you embody when price comes within a few pips of your level and your body starts bargaining. The hunter doesn't bargain. He returns to the center. He lets the heart read first, then he lets the mind do its job, which is execution and management, not panic and prophecy. If you've ever wondered why some traders look almost bored, almost cold, it's not because they don't care, it's because their care is stabilized, and stabilized care looks like calm. And calm is not a mood. Calm is capacity. It's the river being deep enough that surface storms don't change the depth. That's why discipline, for this type of person, isn't framed as effort. Effort is what people use when they're fighting themselves. Discipline in the hunter's world is simply how life is arranged. It's routine as protection, it's repetition as power, it's boredom as sacred ground. Because boredom is where the nervous system stops seeking novelty and starts seeking mastery. And most people can't tolerate boredom, so they never reach mastery, and they call it lack of talent, when it was always lack of tolerance. The hunter tolerates. He can repeat the same process week after week, the same preparation, the same waiting, the same journaling, the same review, the same risk, the same standards, because he is not in love with excitement, he is in love with becoming reliable. Reliability is rare. Reliable men become dangerous quietly because the world can't manipulate a man whose emotions don't move on command. So he builds the simplest structure that produces the deepest change. He trains attention, not as a spiritual hobby, but as a weapon, because attention is what you trade with. Attention is what you live with. Attention is what you become. He trains the heart to hold truth without collapsing. He trains the body to feel urgency without obeying it. He trains the mind to serve, not dominate. And yes, there are inner territories people talk about. Subtle realms, strange experiences, symbolic visions, whatever language you prefer, and whether you take that as literal metaphysics or as the mind's imagery, translating something beyond ordinary cognition, the principle stays the same. When you open the inner gates, you need discernment, you need boundaries, you need stability, because chasing experiences is just another form of greed. So the hunter doesn't chase. He doesn't hunt visions. He doesn't collect spiritual trophies. He deepens capacity. He makes the river deeper. And the deeper the river gets, the less he needs to prove. This is where we get practical, because this isn't about pretty words. It's about building an instrument inside you that doesn't break under contradiction. Tonight or tomorrow, or whenever you can sit without interruption, you take 15 minutes and you stop trying to figure it out. You stop trying to win an argument with existence. You sit, you breathe slowly. You place attention in the center of the chest like you're placing a hand on something warm and steady. And you don't force sensation. You don't demand fireworks. You simply listen. Then you bring one truth you know intellectually, one sentence you can repeat but haven't fully embodied, and you let the words fade while the meaning remains. And you place the meaning in the chest, not as an idea, but as a weight, as a presence, as something you're willing to feel, and you watch what happens. Sometimes the chest opens, warmth spreads, and you realize you've been living 1 inch above your life, thinking about it instead of inhabiting it. Sometimes the chest tightens, and you realize the mind has been repeating a concept the heart doesn't yet trust, and that's not failure, that's feedback. Because feedback is how the instrument gets calibrated. You stay with whatever arises calmly, like a man who can tolerate reality, and then gently, without strain, you ask the quiet question that matters. What is aware of this? What is aware of the chest? What is aware of the sensation? What is aware of the truth being held? And you notice that awareness is not located where thought claims it is. It isn't trapped behind the forehead. It isn't a voice. It's simply present, and that presence is the deeper river. You rest there, not to escape life, to meet it. And the reason this changes you is simple. You stop outsourcing certainty to thought, and you stop mistaking anxiety for intuition. You begin to recognize the difference between mental noise and heart knowing, because heart knowing arrives without aggression. It's steady even when it says something hard, and mental projection arrives hot, needy, insistent, terrified of being questioned. You learn that distinction by repetition, and repetition is how men are forged. If you run this for 40 days, 15 minutes a day, you will notice something that doesn't require belief. You will notice you're harder to provoke. You will notice your decisions get cleaner. You will notice you stop chasing certain things that used to hook you. You will notice the market doesn't pull you around as easily because your center of gravity has moved. And when your center of gravity moves, your whole life follows. In trading, this looks like fewer trades and better trades. It looks like patience without effort. It looks like taking the same A+ CLS conditions again and again without getting bored. because boredom no longer threatens your identity. It looks like journaling without resistance, because you're not using journaling as punishment, you're using it as refinement. It looks like losing without spiraling, because you were never trading to feel worthy. And in life, it looks like not needing to explain yourself. It looks like speaking less and meaning more. It looks like walking away sooner from people and environments that drain you, not with drama, but with accuracy, because accuracy is a form of self-respect. If you're the kind of person who's done collecting and you're ready to be changed by what you already know, drop a comment that says, "I move differently." And if you're really built for it, drop "Hunter," not for me, for you, because identity gets installed through repetition, and the words you choose matter when you say them with a steady chest. And the ending is quiet, the way it always is when something real happens. Because the deepest shifts don't arrive with fireworks, they arrive with inevitability. Once you taste the difference between thinking about truth and resting in it, you don't unsee it. Once you feel what it's like to let the heart lead and let the mind serve, it becomes hard to go back to the old way of scrambling for certainty. Some paths close behind you without announcement. Some men will hear this, and it will mean nothing. They'll turn it into concepts, they'll argue with it, they'll demand proof. They'll keep living in the head because the head feels safe, even when it's miserable. But some will recognize it instantly, not as new information, as a memory, as a reminder of something they've always sensed but never had language for. If that's you, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because we're going deeper into the same territory, not as entertainment, but as calibration. And if you know, you don't need hype, you need consistency. 40 days and 15 minutes, a deeper river, and a man who stops negotiating with his own signal. That's the work. That's the way.